This is Beyond Explanation, where we explore some of Scotland's most baffling and intriguing mysteries. Generations of mountaineers have spoken of a giant ghostly creature on the slopes of the Cairngorms, forcing some to flee from the hills in fear of their lives. There is a growing body of evidence that an evil presence is stalking Britain's second highest peak.
I began to hear the sound of noises in the loose rock behind me, coming down from the high plateau. Every few steps I took, I heard a crunch, and then another crunch, as if someone was walking after me, but taking steps 3 or 4 times the length of my own. I was seized by terror and took to my heels. There is something very queer about the top of Macdui.
The eerie footsteps that mountaineer Norman Colley heard in 1891 remained a secret for over 30 years until the highly respected professor related his story to members of the Cairngorm Club in 1925. With Colley's tale out in the open, others came forward saying that they too had experienced something inexplicable on the slopes of the mountain. Located in the heart of the Cairngorm Mountains, Ben Macdui is Britain's second highest peak. Its isolation has drawn climbers from around the world to its lonely, barren slopes.
The summit of Ben Macdui is very rocky. There's a big boulder field round about the top. Big expanse of nothingness, basically, not a lot in the way of good features to navigate to. So it's quite an arduous place to be on a bad day.
It's huge, sprawls out in all directions. It's got an enormous plateau, very like parts of the Arctic. It's got lochs, waterfalls, more snow patches in the summer than any other hill, huge corries and cliffs. So it's a really big hill, and a bit more mysterious because of that, I think.
The mountain has seen more than its fair share of baffling occurrences. Colley's experience in 1891 was by no means unique. At the beginning of the 20th century, Dr. A.M. Kellis and his brother saw a giant figure of about 10 foot in height at a cairn near the summit. In 1940, Richard Frere woke up to see a large brown hairy creature swaggering down the mountainside. The estimated height was 20 feet. In 1965, prints were found which appeared to have been made by a massive foot or paw. The stride measured 5 feet, similar to what Colley had described in 1891. With echoes of Colley, ordinarily skeptical mountaineers are having similar experiences nearly 100 years later.
I suddenly had this uneasy feeling that there was somebody following me, and I knew there wasn't. But, and I kept convincing myself, there's nothing there, you know. But I must admit, I did speed up, and I didn't run, but I certainly walked faster.
An Aberdeen climber called Sandy Tunin went to the Cairngorms because that was a favourite place for him, and he had his army revolver with him, and it came down thick mist, and he was thinking about the spectre, same as a lot of other people up there, and he turned round and saw this great big grey shape appearing out of the mist. And before he'd time to think, he just drew the revolver and he fired all the bullets into this shape, and it disappeared.
With all these sightings, can everyone be mistaken? With such a seeming wealth of credible eyewitness evidence, isn't this proof enough of the existence of a creature on Ben Macdui? Experts believe that the mountains themselves are responsible for conjuring up the phantoms that people see as the big grey man.
When you're up there on the Cairngorm Plateau on a bad day, sound is very much deadened, and what you think you hear, you perhaps don't hear. Because of the settling of the snowpack, you can hear sort of crumping noises behind you. Visibility is a real nightmare. Even on a bad day of thick cloud, but with good ground viz, a stone that looks as though it's a 10-foot boulder, many yards away, you suddenly realise you trip over it, it's only a foot high. So there are certainly natural phenomena round about there that can explain things.
I think the Macdui experiences are probably down to a number of factors: exhaustion, hypothermia, sensory deprivation, anxiety, and perhaps a willingness for there to be something there anyway. As your body temperature falls, you don't think quite as quickly, you start to do irrational things. Navigation becomes very difficult, and that sensory deprivation starts to play tricks on the mind. If you add into that hypothermia and exhaustion, together with the anxiety of your situation, then I think that's when the mind starts to play tricks.
The unique meteorological conditions that can be found on the high tops might also provide an explanation.
I'm convinced that what they're seeing is a phenomenon that's called the spectre of the Brocken, which is their own shadow projected against the mist.
The sun reflecting past your body onto a sea of cloud below you, what we know is a temperature inversion. And if it's just off a mountain peak, you can sometimes see what we call a halo.
The spectre of the Brocken is usually a very large shadow, and it has a sort of halo around the head, usually like a rainbow. And I can well imagine that if somebody didn't know what it was and they were on their own, they would get quite a fright.
These explanations, however, do not provide a solution to the terrifying ordeal that professional ghost hunter Tom Robertson and friend Derek Blake went through on Ben Macdui in 2004.
The atmosphere is creepy. It's a creepy place. It's like something from the Ice Age, it's boulder strewn. But the weather was starting to come in when we were going up. And I said, I think we'd be better going back down a bit. So that's what we did. We made our way down to the plateau where we pitched the tent.
We had sleeping bags out, made a cup of tea, and tried to heat the tent up. Then it kind of got darker, so we kind of shut the tent up and tried to settle down for the night.
In between 1:15, 1:30 in the morning, we weren't sleeping, we were just dozing, resting. And I'm saying to myself, is that footsteps I hear? The moon had rose, which made it clear, and there were air vents in the top of the tent, clear, and I looked, and I could see, so was that a shadow? This must have been between 10 and 14 feet, and it was massive, grey hair. Oh, my heart was going 10 to the dozen.
The next thing you know, the side of the tent's caved in, and the shadows were all over the tent and everything. You know what I mean? I was scared, like. I was panicking, big time.
All hell broke loose. All hell broke loose. The tent started coming in on top of us, breaking, tearing, you name it. And Derek and I was getting thrown about all over the place.
Absolutely terrified. I didn't know what was happening. You know what I mean? Honestly, it was unbelievable.
Then it stopped, just as quick as it had begun, and it went away. When the light started to come up, it was decided, let's get out of here. When we went outside the tent, I noticed on the ground the footprints. That's massive, massive strides. And the size of the feet was unbelievable.
The majority of experiences on Ben Macdui could be explained by human psychology, meteorological phenomena, or simply by a trick of the light. But Tom and Derek's shredded tent suggests that something may yet be discovered on Ben Macdui.
There'll be no back to McDewey for me. There's something there that's been made into ghost stories, but it's not a ghost. It's anything but a ghost. That's for sure. The big grey man exists, even to the colour.
After the break, the 30-year mystery of the unknown bairn. When the body of a young child was washed up on the Tay estuary 3 decades ago, it was thought to be only a matter of time before he would be identified. But every year since, on the anniversary of the discovery, locals gather in a bleak cemetery to pay their respects to the unknown bairn. It was Sunday afternoon in 1971. Ian Robertson was walking along Tayport's promenade with his young son.
That particular Sunday, on the paddling pool there had been yacht racing, so I brought my wee boy down. Then we decided we would go up to the harbour. Walked along the beach. There was this object in the water, which I thought was a big plastic doll. So I stepped out into the water, having my Wellingtons on, and turned it over. Saw the face, and realised that it was somebody's child. Your first thoughts were, some families lost a bairn. Some mother, someplace, will be very upset.
The small community of Tayport was shocked. Local police were alerted. Who was the boy, and where had he come from? Somebody must have known the identity of the boy, but why did nobody report the child missing?
We didn't know where to start because we didn't have a name. We could have virtually been anyone at all. So we circulated every police area in Great Britain, and then the respective forces would check all the reports of missing persons, and much to everybody's dismay, there was nobody had reported the loss of a 3-year-old boy.
If it had been an adult, you could understand an adult dropping out of the system, maybe walking into the sea, having an accident. If it had been a young girl, perhaps concealing a pregnancy. But here we had a toddler between 2 and 4 who must have had relatives who knew or would have noticed that it had gone missing.
The fact that he then was tagged the unknown bairn, this attracted attention from the press, the length and breadth of the country, and even further afield as the months progressed and no progress was made in identifying the child. The pathologist's report suggested, well, confirmed that the child was dead before he was put in the water and probably died in natural causes, probably pneumonia or malnutrition or something like that. And so there was no question of this ever being a murder inquiry or a case of where there had been any child abuse or anything like that. This was a straightforward death by natural causes, and after death the child was put into the water.
Various leads were followed and dismissed.
A pair of wellies were found quite close to the site, but that was fairly quickly ruled out as belonging to a family in Dundee. A woman's body was washed up near St Andrews, which immediately sparked the possibility there could have been an accident at sea. But again, she was ruled out because they were able to identify the woman. A trawler picked up dolls in their nets.
Was there a family, and everybody went down, and the wee boy was the only one that survived and came up. The rest could be trapped somewhere else underneath, never to come to the surface, you know. It's a very intriguing thing when you sit down and try and visualise what could have happened.
Almost in desperation, the police turned to one other theory, which was that because of the nature of the tides in the Tay, bodies can end up in the Netherlands, in the Baltic. They put out diplomatic feelers through Interpol to the Iron Curtain countries fringing the Baltic, Lithuania, Latvia, etc. And it almost caused a diplomatic incident because they got a very dusty response from the Eastern Bloc, who were angry, as you can imagine, at the suggestion they might have not reported one of their children missing, whether it had fallen from a container ship, because families do travel on container ships, or had simply come from the Baltic coast.
One particular piece of information suggested a breakthrough.
I got a phone call this day, and it was from a member of the public who had just been alighted from a bus at Thornton in Fife, stating that there was 2 tinkers on the bus. And the wifey was crying her heart out over her lost bairn, her wee boy. I've lost my wee boy, and she was going an awful length and was more or less hysterical. And the husband kept telling her to shut up, you know, you get us both in trouble, you get us both to jail and what have you. Now the tinker fraternity was quite separate from the travelling people and quite separate from the gypsies, insofar that their lifestyle was just living in localities and living in tents and helping the farmer pick the odd fruits or going round the doors selling baskets or clothes pegs and things. We tracked the 2 down, and of course in the interval the husband had obviously warned the wife that it should be better to say nothing, otherwise we will get into some serious trouble here. When we interviewed them in the police station, all we got was absolute no response, not even a denial that it was their child. Now that's strange, no a denial. So you might say, well, why not report the child missing? The child died of natural causes, and they probably found the child having died during the night or something, so to avoid a confrontation with the authorities, they just slipped the bairn's body into the river. I mean, and unless somebody's got a better explanation, that's the one that I go along with.
No satisfactory conclusions, however, have been arrived at, which has left the case open to more extreme theories.
Well, I think the interesting thing was the comparison between that discovery of that child and the Thames case in 2001, where there's absolutely no doubt that a child was murdered for ritual purposes and found in flowing water, just like the unknown bairn in the River Tay was. the actual date they guessed that the body had been put in was round about the 1st of May. And of course the 1st of May, Beltane, has a long tradition as a kind of pagan festival day. So in occult